Hammer time, laying hammer construction. Welcome to Shop Talk. We're with Brian Hammersley.
Hello.
Brian of Hammersley Architects.
Yep.
Thanks for coming out, man.
Thanks for having
We
me.
really appreciate you being here. I know it's quite a drive from lovely Oak Park.
Very scenic drive at one time.
North to south,
That's
south
right.
to north. Yeah, good deal. So, Brian, architect,
Yes.
own your own firm.
Yes.
Let's take kind of take it back a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about you, where you came from,
Sure.
and how you got to be an architect. Because not everybody picks architecture coming out of college.
Right.
So you went to University of Illinois,
Right.
which I know has a really, really strong architecture program.
Yep.
When you were coming out of high school, like, did you always want to be an architect?
Even before that. So I grew up in Oak Park, and Oak Park, Frank Lloyd Wright, home and studio there.
sure, yeah.
And so, I don't know, by about 5th or 6th grade, I was pretty sure I wanted to be an architect and started giving tours at the home and studio, actually in junior high.
Nice.
High school, went on to actually take mostly independent studies in architecture after I had completed my coursework. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I took a summer program down in Champaign for architecture, even
Wow.
in high school. So yeah, it's always sort of been, I think, my trajectory. And then went down to Champaign, did 4 years there, and then 2 years at University of Florida. I was in graduate school. I also lived in Europe. I lived in Italy for half a year, study architecture, and then came out 2007 or 1997. Wow, yeah, I'm older than I think.
Yeah.
And ended up moving back. Worked in Gainesville for about a year with a professor, and then moved back to the city and started working in the city of Chicago.
So the Frank Lloyd Wright houses and different building structures were what drew you in.
Yeah, I know, as cliche as that sounds, but being surrounded by all those things and having access to it,
Yeah.
it had a lot to do with that. And I grew up in an old bungalow, and then my parents moved to a Victorian. I worked on it with my dad, so I had access to, sort of old construction, which is actually quite fascinating to me, and to teaching construction at Triton Community College for 4 years. When I first got out, I started working on my own. I used that to subsidize my office at the time. But just the act of being physical and connecting that with ideas, I think, is really sort of what's most interesting to me. Also, creative person, so I'm very creative. So architecture gave me a vehicle to do the kind of things I want to do, so more artistic kind of things.
So when you were a younger man, yeah, you and me both, man.
That's right.
When you were younger, so
Right.
you said that when you were in junior high, you were doing tours,
Right.
of the Frank Lloyd Wright. So I mean,
Right.
that's one style of architecture,
Right.
very specific one style. Is that one style what you thought architecture was,
That's a good
or
question.
at what
Right.
point did it kind of open you up to say, wow, it's such a vast discipline, and then after that, what was it that drew you to where what you're doing now in commercial?
Right. Well, that's a great question. I think that architecture, seeing Frank Lloyd Wright was super interesting because it was actually, even in Oak Park, juxtaposed against a lot of things that were not architectural, right? And so seeing that,
you really do have two flavors there.
yeah,
You have
Victorian.
the Victorian,
right,
and you have the Frank Lloyd Wright looking, but you also have a very kind of urban
for sure.
type of I guess little pockets
Right.
there
Right.
in Oak Park.
Right. So Oak Park, I think, actually, just as a concept, Oak Park's really a great place because it does have a good sense of diversity to it. I would say over the years, that's changed for sure. I think it's become a lot more homogenous now, but I think, especially when I was growing up, that it was the sky was the limit. There's a lot to experience, a lot of adventure, going around and actually poking around and seeing the way things are built. And I made it sort of my mission to, sneak into things and see things under construction. So in addition,
Highly illegal.
I know. I shouldn't admit
Rule
that.
breaker.
Right? I know. I
Statute of
said it. I
limitations.
know. Yeah, but it's past the time, man. So we're cool. But being able to, I think, seeing architecture and seeing how beautiful it was great. And I think getting an opportunity to explain it to other people was also fun. So we did that like for the holiday shows and things like that. But then as high school and then college, you start to really begin to architecture, like you said, is just like it's expensive. There's so much that you can do inside of it. And I think Champaign was great for that because Champaign, I think, sort of leans towards more of a technical school than it does sort of an art-based or design-based school. I mean, it has design, and I enjoyed that, but you're going to understand how things are built if you go to Champaign. So I think that was a really sort of nice place to go for me because there's also a ton of access. You can do all kinds of things down there, and there's a lot of programs outside of architecture. There's a lot of construction sort of information available, so also within the school. So I think in terms of expanding, I think that high school was great because I was able to be as creative as I could be in a lot of those classes. But I think once you leave there and you start to really see sort of where the rubber hits the road, and I actually think Florida was good for that too. Florida actually has a development school inside the School of Architecture, and it was the building next to ours. So there were guys that drove pickup trucks and the guys like myself who rode bikes around. So it was a nice sort of juxtaposition, and also, again, to be able to take those kinds of classes, I think sort of led me to sort of a dual interest. A lot of people are like technical architects or design architects, and I think part of why I went on my own is because I was doing both, and I wanted to explore more. And so by doing those things on my own, I'm able to actually, fiddle with detailing and construction types and all different kinds of things a lot, I think, more readily.
Do you think it's always trying to feed that need to see how things work?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think my biggest hang up is that I appreciate both sides of it, and I watch folks who do either side, and I think both are sort of missing, right? I think what's so great about architecture is that it is so expansive, right? And it allows for really interesting design, right? Which I think is sort of what my focus. My focus, my idea, right? The base of the work that we do is the idea that architecture actually can lift up people, humanity, I mean, to put it in the most existential terms.
Right.
But if you can't build it, then it's just a killer idea. And I think that when I came up, especially in the 90s.
It's unrealistic at some point.
Totally unrealistic. And then I come to a group of builders, and they're like, oh, wow, that's awesome at 3 times the budget. And that's problematic. And I know that just ends up being sort of like this joke, the architect always designs way outside the budget, but the problem is then the work gets diminished. So the quality may be there from a building perspective, but from the design perspective, sometimes things get limited.
Well, but then that gets put on the relationship with the GC, right? Which is something that you and I have talked about.
Right.
It's do you have a contractor that you want to work with that can work with you to figure out how do we get it to look like this, knowing that the budget is this, right? And that relationship has to be able to communicate back and forth and work kind of hand in hand, because a lot of times it's one-sided, and it's not just one-sided from the contractor side. It's going to be one-sided from the architecture side or the design side, project management side, where someone wants something, and the pushback comes from the other side. Well, it can't just be, Langhammer Construction telling you, well, this is how everything should get done, and it can't be you just saying, this is how it should get done. It's got to kind of go hand in hand.
Right. I've spent a lot of time in my career being in the field and doing construction administration, worked for a place that did development, so ended up designing and actually going out and physically building houses outside of Michigan City, because I actually really, really believe that thing that you're describing right now, that crux, that piece, the connection between architect and builder is essential, and I've been through both sides of it. I've definitely seen where everything is the architect's fault, and
it's always the architect's fault, Brian.
Hey, listen, I'm aware. That's why I have insurance. But I also categorically don't agree with that conceptually, because I actually really think that you and I, architect, builder, are actually going for the same goal, right? Which is to make a thing, right? Yeah. And I think that we're both trying to make money, right? So that's also equal too, right? And I think we all should be trying to do that. And I think that what happens a lot of times, it gets pushed off on either side, and I think that ends up being a failure for the project, right? Ultimately, I think everyone does want the thing to be good. They want it to be good, and the client does too, right? And the client, of course, is compelled by a completely different set of criteria, and sometimes they may not fully understand what the outcome is going to be.
Not only do oftentimes they not understand, but they don't really care.
No, they don't care, because in the end, we need to move in. June 1st, buddy. We have a business and we're trying to run. So I get it, but from our perspective, of course, we want to deliver the best product. We want to deliver this product with you, and I agree that for me, the ideal is a relationship that works for everybody, right? That works for the builder, and then also works for the architect.
Exactly. All right, so you finish school. You finish in Gainesville,
1997.
97,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then when did you go to Italy?
96.
Okay.
96 through.
So that was a part
right.
of.
Yeah, it was actually part of my studies was to be able to live in Vicenza, which is on the northern border between Verona and Milan.
And what did you do while you were there?
Oh man, I just toured. I went crazy. Both my thesis advisors were there, so I was focusing my thesis work. That was sort of my pre-thesis work, and so I bought a Euro pass for unlimited travel, and I just went all over. I mean, all over Europe. Took photographs, documented different pieces of work, contemporary work, very traditional old work, that kind of stuff, and just toured, wrote a lot, did a lot of drawing and painting, and then came back and did my thesis.
So there's the true artistic side coming out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
Right.
Once you came back and you started to put like these ideas into practice, what were some of the things that stuck with you that maybe even like you still draw from today?
Well, that there's a tradition about building and designing, and they're like inextricably linked, right? You cannot look at a cathedral somewhere and not think two things. Number one, that someone designed it, right?
Yeah.
But someone actually crafted it and created it, right? And so for me, craft is such a big part of building. And so what I have found is that becomes more and more diminished, quite frankly, as time passes on, right? Is that we're asked less to detail work, right? Because it's not that it's contemporary architecture has no detail, because that's not true either. I think that people's desire to really sort of dive into the sort of detailing side of things is diminished, right? I think that I find interest in the technical side of things, though, and how things actually go together.
Right.
So I think we always try to pull that through our work. So whether it be, like a great example would be, we just finished a bagel shop that's in Oak Park, and it was a shoebox, right? And it was not a design project per se, but I found it fascinating to finally understand how they make bagels, okay, and how the process works and how the machines have to be in very close proximity to one another.
Right.
And so for me, it was this really great riddle of like, this is going to be an incredibly efficient project when it's done. We have quadrupled the output of the bagels, that this person was able to do in another place. So that is very exciting, right? It doesn't look pretty, and it's hard to demonstrate to people like we made more bagels or whatever. But like in the end, all these things have to work very close to one another.
Any kind of work, and this is kind of coattails onto what you're talking about. We've done some restaurant work, front of house, back of house, kitchen. A couple of projects that I'm thinking of were pretty elaborate, right? The one main consistent thing between the projects was how they laid out the kitchen, right? Which is probably one of the smallest areas in the restaurant,
right?
How they laid it out, and blew my mind the first time I saw the plans for it to try to understand why this flat top griddle is here versus here,
right?
Why this food prep is here versus here, and how everything flows and how efficient it is.
Yep.
So if you can set up in a shoebox to have a guy make 3 times the amount of bagels because it's efficient, it just shows how incredibly inefficient his old place was.
Well, yeah, and that if you're not putting the right people together, right? And so, collaboration, I think, is a major part of what we do, right? Is that the pieces have to fit. I mean, I like talking with you guys, and that matters, right? That really matters, because I think part of it sets the tone for what people are trying to accomplish, right?
Sure,
and ultimately, like, we're all people. We all go home and do different things at night, and so the bottom line is while we're here, right, we're trying to make a thing. And so I think the focus always goes back on that thing. And I think to your point about sort of the complexity, I think I want everyone to be as excited about the complexity as I am, right? Because if I'm not getting up and getting excited about my day.
How's that going for you?
So far, so good. I'm here, right?
Not everybody's as excited as you are, Brian.
Right. That is also a fact.
Right.
So.
I like that you say like we're making a thing.
Yeah.
Right. We're making a thing. I like that. I'm going to steal that.
Go for it, man.
I talk about the like the elevator speech stuff
Right.
all the time with different people, and
Okay.
I just had this conversation this morning. All of the different sectors of commercial real estate, right? Furniture dealership, right? So I came from the commercial furniture world before I got into the GC side, and had a great run. And one of the things that I could never get past was when people would ask you, so what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm business development for a commercial furniture dealership. Immediately their mind would go to IKEA, or it would go to Art Van Furniture, or oh, you sell furniture. You know what? I need a new
Right.
No. You don't understand. You don't understand.
Right.
Then you'd have to talk about the process and how, furniture gets spec'd in jobs, and it just wasn't an easy thing, right? Work for a general contractor. I'll tell you, man. Everybody seems to think they know what a GC does.
Right.
We build a thing.
Right.
That's kind of what I'm
Right.
driving to. Is like we
Right.
build things, right?
Right.
Oh, you see that building there? Yeah, I built that.
Right.
We're building a thing. I'm stealing it. Just so you know.
Yeah, but the thing is about that's really interesting is that it's totally true is that people say, oh, well, yeah, you're an architect, so, you want to look at my bathroom? No, right? No, I mean, like, because there are a million different ways
Make me
of
a
approaching
bicycle cloud.
Yeah. Back to that, huh?
Right.
Yeah, I'm your architect,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like any doctor can perform surgery. Or,
Exactly,
it's,
exactly.
So it does, I think, it tends to be a little bit, I don't know, off the beaten path. For me, to get back to that point, though, is that like I really do think it's the challenge of what we're making, and that's what makes it fun, right? So I think we have done all kinds of projects. So we've done restaurants, we've done commercial build-outs, done residential, done theater projects, all different kinds of things, and ultimately, I think that reflects my desire to just learn more all the time.
Yeah.
And so we do have. The world is filled with experts, and Chicago's a great place to be because there's someone somewhere who knows about something, right? So in terms of approach and project stuff like that, it always gives us an opportunity to talk to someone new, right? Get a new piece of expertise or some sort of information about a project type that we didn't know about before, right? And then the rest of it is the same. Bathrooms work the same. All those kinds of things work the same. Egress and all those kinds of things. I'm self-certified in the city of Chicago, so I have spent a lot of time learning about code and dynamics sort of surrounding around those kinds of things.
I'm familiar with your process a little bit.
Yeah, so we end up being in that space too. So we're in a space that is all about actually putting people into places after. So we're architect of record. We review drawings that come in from national, international firms. So part of that is also I've found that it's important for me to stay sharp with what I'm doing, and being self-certified has actually been a great way of doing it because I'm reviewing projects the same way that a city reviewer would do it as well. So that we can stay with it, because part of it for me again is that going back to the same thing is that like a real true architect in my mind is both sides of the brain, right? Like I think the star architect concept is dead. I do. And I know that people still want to say this architect's doing great work, but don't forget that architect is working with an army of talented people. There's no way that one person is doing one thing. And I think that we need to sort of erase that, because there are the builders who are doing a fantastic job.
It's a stigma that has been around forever and ever and ever about the architect, right?
Yeah.
Architect's always the smartest one in the room.
Yeah. Sometimes, generally the biggest ego in the room, right? And I think that that's part of it, is that there are, to say that we don't work with other people would be a lie.
Do you think that that's lessened though, that stigma of the architect?
I think it has become a little less like that.
I think it has.
I think there's less about like the guy who goes and does a sketch on a napkin and then everyone says, "Oh my God," However, I think that and not to diminish our role, but I think to even say like the architect is the lead on a lot of those things, it's not necessarily true. I mean, it's working on a theater, so we're working with an acoustic engineer that's doing theaters all over the world. They are awesome at what they do, and there would be no way that we would be able to come up with the right design.
You don't have the expertise,
right? And it would. That's the crux of the whole project. Is how does it sound? So we're doing a bunch of super cool stuff and adding some things in the back, XYZ, but like without that person, right? And then without the person who's building it, and without the structural engineer that's helping us do these wacky things that the acoustic engineer is asking us to do. So I do agree that it is less about the one person who is doing the good stuff. However, I do think that it's still like, well, this architecture firm, and I think like there are definitely groups that are working together to make good stuff, right? And they're definitely spearheaded by an architect from the design perspective, and that's what gets the most credit. However, a lot of the feats that are being performed now by builders and other consultants absolutely are part of that. I really just believe it's a collaborative process. I think saying it's just one person or one group of people, I think is not accurate. I mean, I think beyond not giving credit where credit's due, I think it's not a fair representation of sort of how it actually goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I mean, we see drawings of all kinds on all kinds of different work.
Right.
Some drawings are more complete than others, and I think that just goes to the style and whatever service that architecture firm is providing to the client.
Right.
As far as what they need to get accomplished, what needs to happen on our end.
Right.
But yeah, I agree that I think that stigma of it being single source, one person's is less and less.
Yeah.
Most certainly. All right, so you get out of school in Gainesville. You stayed there. You stayed there for a year afterwards.
I did.
Congratulations.
That was great.
And then you came back and put your roots back down in Oak Park.
Yep.
Started your firm in 2008
or 9.
2009, which
it's 11 years.
Great time to start your own business.
Yeah. That was my wife's idea, and I give her full credit for that. No, I actually had been working, doing design and developing houses, and she just asked me, why aren't you doing this for yourself? And I thought, well, that's a pretty good question. Now, that was right about the time where the economy tanked, but the good news was that a lot of people then just moved inside, right? So kitchens, small renovations. I had got work basically the day I started my own firm. Actually, I had work in Indiana even prior to finishing my registration.
So you managed to stay busy through the whole thing.
Oh yeah, totally. And then picked up larger work within the first year and a half of people started again large like corporate interior work through connections and started doing that work. And then after that, it's just been sort of word of mouth since then.
So you've been flying under the radar now for 10 years.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
I love it. All word of mouth.
All word of mouth. We just started doing business development this year. I just hired someone this year.
How's that working out?
It's good. I mean, I think part of the word of mouth thing is great, but part of word of mouth brings projects to you, right? Versus us looking and seeking out different project types. So we're combining the word of mouth and being grateful for all the people who continue to call.
Well, I know that I met you through word of mouth. I mean, mutual contact that we both share.
Right.
Those I kind of find are the best.
Yeah. Well, because they're passed around, right? Because I have found that it is everyone tends to be pre-approved. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
Right? Yeah. That you've talked to people. So that's good. We have just, I think, in the last several months, the last 6 months, whatever, started to be a little more competitive, like RFIs, partnering up with people from like much larger projects, 100,000 square feet projects, stuff like that. And I think that's fun. I mean, it's much lower % return.
It is.
And so the hustle, you got to be strategic about that.
It looks sexy in your book, though.
It does. And so we definitely do a lot of, we did this and we did that kind of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, what eats me is not building, right? And so like in the end, it's cool and hustling
eats
and
me away too.
Well, yeah, right. Well, yeah, you guys do a lot of paperwork. At some point, like, it's nice to be outside, and it's nice to see things being constructed and seeing. For me, it's a constant reminder of scale of humanity and how things work. Is to go out there and say that's a 10-foot opening, and then looking at it and saying there's a 10-foot opening, right? Yeah. And not that I don't understand those things intuitively. However, it's always great to see them actually happening the way that you've designed them, the way you propose them, right? And so, and to see the crews do it too, right? Because part of it, I thrill on going out for construction administration, get to hang out and get to see how it's going on. So I definitely enjoy that. I'm not out there in a suit, generally out there in boots,
right? Right.
To be part of it. So
well, but it, you know a lot about a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
At this point, yeah.
And the things you don't know, you probably know enough to be dangerous, huh?
To have a conversation and ask someone else about, absolutely,
of course.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I like being out there, because sometimes the guy swinging the hammer is actually going to tell you, it's way more efficient if you turn it to the left.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like very basic. Right.
Exactly.
So, like
where are you headed in terms of your business?
That's a good question. I would say that right now we have been pushing more into doing public work. So public as in large scale work. I don't think like public as in public, government work. I
Sure.
think more like we want to work on larger scale and affect more people, right? So I think ultimately some of the work we've done in the theater and the arts has been very gratifying. We've enjoyed doing that kind of work. Again, I think public space, so um, multifamily housing, I think, is of interest, but combining those kinds of projects, I think, with different programs. So, like John Ronan did a project recently in the city, which is a senior center and a library that they had put together,
Okay.
two separate project types. So, a lot of the research and the work that we're doing is we're talking with larger developers and trying to understand how do we put together projects like that, right? The idea that social infrastructure or things that are more than just like a post office, but like how do we propose and put projects into neighborhoods that are actually there for the neighbor, for the neighborhood, for the kids, for those kinds of things, and how do we work with municipalities to do that, right? So I think it's a little abstract what we're trying to do,
Yeah.
but I think that again we're very lucky to have people who are looking out for us and keeping us busy with work as we do this more theoretical, less funded work and less defined work. So we find ourselves working in places like the South Side, the West Side a little bit more, looking at how we're bringing good work to places like that where there's literally no resources.
And who's driving that? The developer?
Well, right now we work with private clients. So we have people who are basically like good Samaritans who are putting their money into it. What we're looking for is so you have the large developments, which are very large, right? And then you have individual projects, which are, so we're doing a daycare center in South Shore.
Okay.
That's one person who's funding it, and it has been a long time coming because the city is blind to what happens, right? But this is a building that has been permitted since '91, right? So when they see a permit come in 2017, a very long list of things that are attached to that.
Yeah, of course.
So we're dealing with, going in for special permits and those kinds of things. So it's definitely way more time consuming. Now, to put some of these bigger projects in place, and so I spent a lot of time, so business development, I spent a lot of time going around actually talking to people about like, how would you get a project like this done, right? And what we found is that you are looking at the requirement of really looking for private funding to do a lot of these social infrastructure ideas. And I've met a lot of people who are in different sort of zones or areas of lending. And so I think where there's a will, there's a way. I just think it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately, I think it's good work. So I think if we are stabilized by the work that we get on the day-to-day, the work that we're looking to do, I think is going to be more time-consuming, a little bit more political. And I think we're willing to work towards those goals. I mean, I think that's fine. So, keep the office percolating. I got people inside there doing work, but we're still trying to figure out sort of like how the world works, right? Because again, going back to the idea that like architecture is not a passive thing. I guess it can be. Some people sit by and just wait and then get a call and say, oh, you want to do a restaurant? Sure, we love doing restaurants, right? Versus we really believe that architecture is a vehicle for making things better. So how do we actually use architecture to do that? And that is well beyond, I think, what they teach you in school in terms of what am I looking for, who are the type of people I want to be talking to, and what kind of works with that kind of idea.
I would think that knowing you and hearing you say that, you're more of the exception versus the rule.
Yes.
To someone who is an architect, and I mean that's kind of a true visionary type of a statement to say, about where you want to be and the type of work that you want to be involved in, right? Something that makes humanity better,
right?
That's a driver for you.
That's the reason why I do it. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay.
Now, in your shop, you mentioned your shop.
Yeah.
And you have 3 employees.
Yep.
And what kinds of work are they doing?
Well,
are they all architects?
They're doing a range. Well, we have some folks who are like more junior, right? And those folks are actually doing a lot of the collateral that I'm talking about. Okay. So like a lot of the design sort of focused work is the work that sort of the younger set will be doing versus sort of my lead project manager is handling the lion's share of I don't say drafting, but certainly the project coordination, that kind of work. Yeah. And then we have some people who are doing the drafting as well. I do oversight on all of it. We try to keep the project project load manageable, so I actually have time to access everything. Not a control freak at all. It's more actually to make sure that things are like looking good and that they make sense, right? Because when they go to you, they need to make sense.
Right,
and so ultimately, we have
You're the last set of eyes.
Yeah. Well, and the middle and the beginning. But but yes. In short, the idea is that we, like you said, is that we actually really pride ourselves on doing good drawing sets and not letting things to the field.
You're the guy.
Yeah. No, except we like you, man. So we're willing to make changes. All right, we're not.
You're the guy that provides good drawings.
Oh yeah. Give us a call. But I think part of that is because we actually like to geek out on the drawings, right?
Sure,
so for me, it's like writing a book.
Side.
Yeah, it's like writing a book, right? You can't leave out that chapter. You have those things. And so, permitting pushes us in certain directions as well, depending on the municipality. But
I will say this, man, after walking that building with you and talking about the code stuff and the permitting stuff, I will say, hands down, you're one of the best I've seen, man. You knew a lot about a lot of things.
I have to. That's the self-certification side of it. That's what we do. And I'm actually getting recertified next week. I have done it for 6 years, and I had to take another class. That's just me being a nerd, man. I appreciate the compliment, but part of it is I really thrill at learning new things, right? Yeah. So when you walked in that building was pretty cool because it had I'm totally blanking on it. The on demand, right? It was geothermal, so the whole building. That's pretty rare to find, and it was definitely a hodgepodge of things, and it would have definitely been a bunch of work. However, it was an interesting place to start, right?
Very much so.
And so that gets people excited. I like to think that in construction, like in anything else, like. Yes, everyone has to get up and they earn the bucks and they go in and they do their thing. But sometimes it's fun to do stuff that's a little bit one-off, right? Yeah. Because it's challenging and a guy doesn't have to have a master's degree to figure that one out. Sometimes it's just like, wow, this is fun today. I'm going to do something different.
The conversion and talking with you and the rest of the team about the conversion from a residential to a commercial. I mean, it's pretty unique.
Right.
That's pretty unique. And there's so much to it that I mean, certainly I didn't know.
Right. And weird, and it's sort of like, oh, we're going to have to how are we going to figure that out? And it's not bad if everyone's on the same page, right? And I think that's the thing is that there's that really fine line between this being like, this is a screw up or this is going to be terrible versus like, well, I mean, honestly, really what it comes down to is the money. Is that people have the money and the patience, right? To go through like what it's going to take because, your expertise or this LCI's expertise, like the whole point is building, right? I mean, like that's the whole point,
I know
right?
that when we budgeted it, we called the client. And the first thing I said to him was, "Are you sitting down?"
Yeah. How you doing, man?
Yeah, are you sitting down because you're about to get shocked?
Yeah. Not yet.
Right.
It's okay.
Right. So where in the city? You mentioned some south side, some west side. Mm-hmm. Is the majority of your work all city? Are you seeing more? Because you are rooted in Oak Park, right?
Live in Oak Park.
Right. But do you see work locally that meets kind of the criteria that you want to do type of work? and expanding out into suburban. So you have suburban versus city. Are you noticing any trends in that world that are pushing the work further out?
I think that what I have found is that we do work. So a lot of our self-certification architect record work is still main business district. So we're in the loop doing a lot of work in the loop.
Yeah.
And that I don't actually think is going to slow down. People have been talking about recession now for a couple of years, right? So
in what capacity are you doing that work? Are you like the building architect?
Both. So we do both. So we do the review and the self-certification, but we also do build out. So we do both because we're equipped to do both, and it's sort of no-brainer stuff. Interior stuff, we like doing interiors work. It's a microcosm generally because you have a group, depending on how passionate they are, that they're making their home base, right? And that's exciting, and it's exciting for lawyers. It's exciting for the whole gamut of people who are generally professional, right? So that's a professional set. And then we have a smattering of other work. So we do theater work, and so that's been mostly like in the Loop area. And the residential work we've done, we do have a little bit of residential right now, but that's like a sort of a one-off, like custom.
Us too.
Right?
Yeah,
like fun little
those
project.
things will
right?
come to us, and they are one-offs.
Right.
Because I would never ever claim to be a residential
Right.
contractor by any means.
Right.
I think that the residential side is more challenging for us because
Right.
it's such a personal thing
Yep.
for the homeowner or the building owner or whatever they are.
Right.
Right. We're just like, well, just give us drawings and we'll build what we want to build. Right. It's, oh no, it's just a lot of.
It's my house.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's probably why we don't get into it that
Right.
much.
Right.
There's always the one-off
Right.
for us. Just
And that's,
like,
I think, the same for me. Is that so? I did residential for like a long time, and in fact, really cut my teeth on that. But in terms of access to more people, I prefer doing larger scale work.
Yeah.
And that the one-off work is generally like a pretty special client who's looking for a thing. So like talk about like the one project we're doing right now, the residential project in Oak Park is, professor who's an artist, and he and his wife are doing this addition, but it's an expansion, and it's a cube that we rotated at 90 degrees. It fits a lot into sort of like what we like to do, sort of the intellectual side of these things,
Yeah.
and it's definitely been a much more sort of long, protracted project, but the results are fantastic, and the language with the client is excellent. In terms of the way that we discuss it, is not about like it's not as much about where we put the sink as much as it is about the experience of being in the space in the wintertime and how the sunlight works in the space. So it really gives us the vehicle for exploring that, which we don't get in corporate work a lot, and that's okay.
They don't care. Put the sink here.
They don't, they want it to look a certain way, and they are certainly into image. They have their own image for how that's going to work, but it's not driven by the same sort of minutiae or the detail that you get into. When, like you said, it's residential architecture. I got nothing but respect for the people who do that full time. I think it's highly competitive, and it's also very, it's like real touchy. It's real high touch, and I don't always feel high touch.
It's very personal.
Right?
Yeah,
So,
no. You don't like people? Come on.
I love people, man. Most of the time.
Our business would be fantastic if we had no
That's right.
clients.
That's
If
right.
we had no clients,
Yeah.
man, would my
Yeah.
business be great?
We're killing it. Instead to talk to each other, it'd be all industry people. It'd be beautiful. I don't mean that.
We
Sorry.
we got nothing to say to one another.
That's right.
So,
Right. Just do the thing, man. Just go.
Yeah,
Call
yeah.
me when you're done.
So, where do you see yourself in terms of growth for your company? Like you do X amount of dollars a year. Do you
Right.
want to be a big architecture design type of firm?
Mhm.
I know like here at LCI, we've built over the last 6 years that I've been here. We've certainly built our book of business and our client base, and we've built our financial growth in terms of the company, and things are good, and they're continually getting better. We kind of know, in having conversations in-house, our management team, we kind of know where we want to get to, and it's very attainable. We feel through putting some certain pieces in place, but once we get there, then what? And I've asked that question, like, okay, so we're a $50 million a year company, and things are going great, and everybody's happy. And then we're at 60, and then we're at 70, and then we're at 80.
Right.
Where do we go now? Now that we're an $80 million a year company, and this is what we look like.
Right.
Where do we go now?
Right.
I mean, and by all intents and purposes, we're still a smaller
Right.
construction firm.
Right.
Maybe no longer boutique
Right.
type firm, but we are a smaller construction firm.
Right.
But at what point? I always ask that when we start talking about where we want to be and who do we want to be.
Right.
Because there's a lot within that statement. I mean, there's a lot of things that are important to us in terms of who we are and how we grow and what does our family look like.
Right.
Which, as dysfunctional as we are a family.
That's right. Right.
So where do you want to be in terms of your growth, and how big do you want to get, and do you see yourself, starting? You mentioned, I know that that you had been involved in one of the larger projects down at the post office.
Right.
And, we talked offline about how difficult those projects can be from a man-hour standpoint and a financial standpoint, everything you're putting in versus what you're getting out. And
Right.
They're big and they're beautiful jobs, and I would love to say, hey, I built the new
Right.
100,000, 150,000 square foot job down at the post office, and you look at that, and is that like kind of what is going to define you moving forward?
Right.
Or do we stay in our lane and we do those $2 and $3 million a year jobs and just keep trucking along?
Right.
So in terms of your firm,
Right.
Hammersley Architects, where do you want to go? It's a big question.
Yeah, but it's one I definitely think about. I see us in the next couple of years actually going national, and taking some of the ideas that I'm interested in. So, again, looking at multiple program types in a single building, right? Making more density out of the projects that we're doing, like in dense spaces, urban spaces. I see us getting bigger, but not much bigger. I don't want to spend the rest of my life managing, right?
You want to continue to fly under the radar?
Maybe a little bit above the radar, but certainly I would like our work to be of very high quality, both from a built, so it has to satisfy the following. It has to be a good piece of architecture, right? So well designed, thoughtful. It has to engage with society, right? Number two. And three, the ideal would be that it's for a larger group of people, right? And so the idea is that the trajectory of our firm right now and the way we're working is that we have a good base of work that we're doing. And these aspirational projects are where I'm interested in moving towards, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's local to Chicago. In fact, I think these ideas are national, frankly, and we've looked in other places. So we've started looking at some of second-tier cities around the country, so Pittsburgh, Louisville, these kinds of areas, and looking at the way developers are putting projects in place, and seeing how we can become competitive in that. So I think when I look at people that I aspire to be like, I think they're mid-sized firms. So me adding maybe another 15 people or something like that, and but the projects are good. So all projects being good. So I'm fine with limiting our size based on quality of projects because, as you well know, is that everyone needs to get paid, everyone needs to get fed, right? And so if you think that that's all going to be all glamour projects, it's not, right? And so how do you find a balance between saying yes to projects that in the end, they still take time, man. You are still putting project people at it. You're putting someone having to do it, and they have to do a good job, okay? Yeah. You are still delivering a quality product to someone. So I think what we're looking to do is to increase the number of projects that we find to have, I guess, social impact, and wed those with the projects that we're already doing that are bringing in finances, right? And so I think right now I feel like we're in a good space as we start to move up towards that, right? And so I think putting together more projects of greater social import is the goal. I think that I've been managing my own firm again, like for 11 years and managed in firms prior to that. So like I think managing is a challenge only as you continue to move up, right? So I think, and I actually just think that's a growing pain thing, and I've done it before, so I'm less concerned with that. So I think adding good talent, like really high quality talent, is essential.
Of course.
So where I've like filled in before with people who could do the job or whatever, I think now I'm definitely away from that. So the people who are coming in now are talented and are passionate. That's another thing, is that they really share the same view. They don't have to be a clone, but I hope people bring their own passion in the work. I find a lot of the folks you talk to now, they think that architecture is like, it's just a job. And my 2 cents is that there are a lot of other ways that you can make money than doing architecture. I think our architecture is not it's the poor man's professional job, right? There's a lot of other ways to do it. So if you're not loving it, man, I think it's time to move on.
We're all in it for the same reasons, man. We want to build a thing.
Yeah.
We want to build a thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that when I find a lot of people who are not looking to do that, and it's sort of like, well, I don't know how long you're going to be sticking around here. Because I want people who are passionate about their work, okay? I want people who are in the office who are passionate about their work. And sometimes you have to do work that's not that great, right? But we all did, right?
We call that work gum in your hair.
Yeah.
And we come across a lot of service, like a lot of service
Right.
work,
Right.
Move this door from here to there. That's
Right.
that's kind of a pain, but
Right.
you know what? That's part of what we do. That's part of the service that we provide.
And it's your expertise. See,
Yeah.
People, think that glamour and expertise are somehow like that you're the guy performing surgery on the dude at the L with the spoon, right? Because you're a doctor, right? Versus like, when some people come in and they got a corn on their foot, and that needs to get removed too.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, I believe that both those people will be grateful in their own way, right? And I think that that's what's up, is that in the end, we're delivering, if you deliver quality product, you're going to have someone who's going to be grateful forever. Sure. And I think that that's something I don't think you can measure and say that one thing's more important than another. You can not do jobs, right? Yeah. But I think once you engage, I think you gotta go for the gusto and get it done.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree without a doubt.
Right.
Without a doubt. You have a website.
I do.
What's the website?
HammersleyArchitecture.com.
Spell it.
HAMMERSLEY. The word architecture. ARCHITECTURE.
Well done.
.com.
So if you want to find Brian, you can find him at HammersleyArchitecture.com.
Yes.
We will be obviously promoting this on social media and whatnot, and hopefully help you to fly above the radar a little bit.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, man,
today.
I'm so glad you came in. I know that we rescheduled this a couple of times, so I'm glad you got to come in and sit in a hot seat for a few minutes. Yeah, you feeling all right?
I feel all right.
Anything you want to leave us with?
Just say thank you again for the time today. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. In general, it's always nice to see people who are committed in the same way that we are to it. And obviously, please do check out our firm. We're always doing fun work and obviously looking for people who are passionate and excited about the work that they're doing too.
Awesome. Brian, thanks for being here, man.
Thank you.
You got it.
Ciao.